There's already serious criticism of the abuse of the small business relief package that Congress has already passed into law. When Donald Trump was asked about this today, he pretended that he didn't like what was happening in the abuse of the small business program, abuse that was specifically and deliberately allowed by the Trump regulations. And instead, Donald Trump condemned another recipient of federal money obtained under a completely different provision of that law, a provision specifically designed to help poor college students harmed by the shutdown of their colleges, which in some instances left some of those poor students with nowhere to live.
You said about the small business program, Harvard's going to pay the money back. How confident are you that you can claw back money from places like Harvard?
Well, I'm going to have to look. I don't like when Harvard, that has, I think, a $40 billion endowment or some incredible amount of money, that Harvard gets this money. Harvard should pay that money back. I want Harvard to pay the money back, okay? And if they won't do that, then we won't do something else. They have to pay it back. I don't like it. I don't like it. This is meant for workers.
Harvard University did not take one penny that was meant for workers, not one penny. In the $2 trillion relief package that was passed by Congress, about 7% of that bill was a specific set aside for the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund aimed to help students, not the universities. Through a formula in the law, Harvard was allocated $8.6 million, 100% of which they have dedicated to students in financial need. Most students who go to Harvard cannot afford it. 2/3 of the student body gets financial aid from Harvard, and much of that financial aid, in effect, comes from the university's endowment. Donald Trump specifically said he did not want to mention anyone else who he thought was abusing federal money, so he didn't mention the university with the second largest endowment in America, which is the University of Texas, which has a $31 billion endowment. The University of Texas got $172.5 million in that legislation, which Texas Republican Senator John Cornyn bragged about. The University of Texas didn't take any of that money away from workers either. And we can hope that the University of Texas is using that money honorably and passing it all along to students in desperate financial need. In the new legislation that Congress has agreed on today, it will provide $310 billion for the Paycheck Protection Program, $60 billion for the Emergency Grant and Business Loan Program, $75 billion for hospitals, and $25 billion to support coronavirus testing. Joining us now is Democratic Congresswoman Val Demings of Florida. Congresswoman Demings, I went through that story about Harvard that Donald Trump was lying about today, just to point out that there are always surprises about what happens in this legislation. And one of the big surprises is how much the Small Business Fund is being abused. What can the new legislation do to protect the small business fund to actually go to people in real small businesses? And what can it do to protect people's paychecks?
Well, Lawrence, thank you. It's good to be back with you. And look, when we passed CARES 1, we passed it with the primary goal being to protect America's workers, and particularly those small businesses that are the most vulnerable in our communities. Obviously, our $2.2 trillion package, the largest passed in American history, was not enough. We quickly realized that. And so we've got to regroup and make sure that we have processes in place and procedures that will make sure that the money that we will pass, hopefully tomorrow in the interim relief package, will go to those who need it the most, that those dollars are specifically designated for those small businesses who all over the country are struggling just to stay afloat. And so we have much work to do. Of course, this package is not perfect either. As you've already mentioned, it includes testing. And if we're ever going to get back to any degree of normalcy, we've got to make sure that we do, as the speaker said many weeks ago now, testing will allow us to get there. And then we need to take care of our hospital and those healthcare workers who you see are struggling every day to keep us safe, to keep us healthy. We need to look at hospital capacity and make sure that we're able to meet not only the needs of the epidemic or the pandemic now, but to be able to address any future needs. And so we still have some work to do, but we hopefully will pass this legislation either tomorrow or Thursday.
Congresswoman Demings, the Miami Herald is reporting that in your state of Florida, over 1.5 million people at least have applied for unemployment benefits, and only 40,000 have actually received any unemployment benefits. 40,000 sounds like what you would get in a normal month.
Lawrence, Florida taxpayers paid over $77 million for our current unemployment system. Under Governor Rick Scott, he was advised that there were some major problems with the system, that the system was difficult to navigate, that there were over 600 system errors, that there were problems with the system, and he did nothing about it. There's no evidence that he did anything to correct it. Last year, Governor DeSantis was informed of the problems by state auditors with the system. He did absolutely nothing. It appears there's no evidence that he did to correct the many numerous flaws and errors. And now here we are with the pandemic, as you mentioned, that has caused over 1 million people to be unemployed who desperately need those benefits. They're being kicked out of the system. They cannot navigate it. Now, the governor has hired some call takers. But the problem that we are seeing in Florida deals with fundamental problems with the system that were never, ever addressed. And we find ourselves as basically the worst, at the bottom of the list in terms of how we deal and how we process unemployment benefits in our state. And we've got to do better.
Congresswoman Demings, before you go, you're on many speculative lists as a possible choice for Joe Biden as a possible vice presidential candidate. Would you accept that offer if Joe Biden made that offer?
Well, Lawrence, in my career, in my lifetime, I've chosen tough jobs. And when we look at what's going on in our country right now, I've certainly been a crisis manager in numerous situations. I would consider it an honor, if asked, to serve my country alongside Vice President Biden.
Congresswoman Val Demings, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And when we come back, Georgia's Republican governor wants people to go to movie theaters next week. That's after they get massages, tattoos, and haircuts this weekend. Some mayors in Georgia are outraged by the governor's decision to allow some non-essential businesses to reopen. Albany, Georgia, has been hit hard by the coronavirus. The coroner there says it hit like a bomb. The mayor of Albany, Georgia, will join us next.